mental health services for students, STEM education, English learning support, adult literacy classes, and may result in higher class sizes in grades K through 3. It will disproportionately impact our rural school districts. Among the most heavily impacted on a per student basis, the Ashe County, Polk County, and Graham County, and may result in laying off roughly 1,000 educators. It will also particularly impact counties that have been hurt by Helene and are still recovering. Our estimate is that of the Helene impacted counties, this would cut them to the tune of $18 million. This is why I and a number of AGs are joining together to take the Department of Education to court. Because in addition to being wrong and harmful, this is completely against the law. Congress created these programs. It authorized funding for these programs. The Department of Education does not have the authority to now withhold those funds, certainly not the night before they were set to arrive. We didn't get this email the day before. We got this email the night before. So we are taking them to court. And I'm confident that we are going to prevail, because I think the legal argument here is very straightforward. For all of our teachers and students and parents at home, I know this has injected a lot of uncertainty, a lot of confusion. What I want you to hear from me is that we are going to try and resolve this as fast as possible so that you can all get back to doing what you need to be doing, which is focusing on having a successful school year. Keep in mind, the next school year for over 1 million kids is a few weeks away. This is the last time when we need to get rug pulled by the federal government. We need to have teachers and students and parents all focusing on having a successful school year. I'm going to be followed by our Superintendent, Mo Green.
Good afternoon. My name is Maurice Green. I do go by Mo, and I have the distinct honor of being North Carolina's Superintendent of Public Instruction. This afternoon, I'll cover 4 topics: gratitude, commitment, impact, and reverence. First, gratitude. In my position, I serve as the Chief Administrative Officer and as a Chief Advocate for North Carolina's public schools, and for the 1.5 million students we are given the incredible responsibility of educating. On behalf of those students and our public school educators, I express my sincere gratitude to North Carolina Attorney General Jeff Jackson for joining this important lawsuit on behalf of North Carolina. I appreciate that filing a lawsuit against the United States government is not an action one should take without considerable deliberation, as we reasonably expect our federal government officials to act in accordance with the United States Constitution, the laws of this nation, and in this instance, what our nation's government has obligated itself to do on behalf of our public school students. Second, commitment. North Carolina public schools receive local, state, and federal funds to serve our students. Annually, North Carolina public schools receive over $1 billion in federal funding, most of which comes in the form of dedicated funding based on established formulas. When Congress approved funding for public schools earlier this year, it made a commitment to North Carolina's public school students for the 2025-26 school year. Among the funds promised to North Carolina's public schools are the slightly more than $165 million at the heart of this lawsuit. Conducting summer programs, hiring and developing teachers, and purchasing educational supplies were underway in anticipation that these funds would be available on July the 1st, as they have been consistently doing so for years. But mere hours before, on the evening of June 30th, certain federal administrators decided to withhold the flow of these funds without warning, even though they had been approved by Congress. To date, they have continued to withhold these funds. While administrators certainly can and should review programs, this is a very different situation from when a discretionary grant, for example, is canceled or non-continued. In that instance, the program ends. Here, the full legal responsibilities and duties remain. However, as of July the 1st, there is no funding to meet these obligations. It is then this disappointing failure of these United States government officials to honor our federal government's promise, its commitment, if you will, to our public school students by withholding that $165 million that compels me, after due deliberation, to be supportive of this lawsuit. Which gets me then to the third point, impact. The impact to North Carolina's public schools cannot be overstated, as these withheld funds make up about 10% of its federal funding. These funds serve directly and indirectly hundreds of thousands of our students, including some of the most vulnerable. More than 900 educator and teacher full-time equivalent positions in our public school units, and another 50 plus full-time equivalent positions at the North Carolina Department of Public Instruction are impacted. Our public school units and DPI have signed contracts and have hired staff members based on the promised funding. Now, hundreds of public school employees' positions are at risk, and thousands of students are faced with the reality that they may not be able to access the very funds they need to succeed. These impacts hit schools, students, and communities across this state. In Guilford County Schools, for example, these funds support math and literacy and art positions, directors and coordinators who provide support to and professional development for teachers. These funds also pay for supplies for the JROTC, school safety scanners, the online assignment software, and arts and physical education supplies. In other words, these funds impact every student in every school. As another example, in the 24-25 school year, these funds supported more than 10,000 students in about 100 after-school and summer programs run by various organizations like the Boys and Girls Club, the YMCA, and churches across the state. In another school district, the Roanoke Rapids Graded School District, the loss of funding will impact a number of various things, including a teacher who provides direct student instruction and coordinates a new teacher support program, and also eliminate some after-school tutoring. Let me be clear that these impacts are happening now. Over 40 schools are already in session, with many more starting in the coming days and weeks, with the rest starting over the course of the next several weeks. Finally, then I get to reverence. This lawsuit, which has been brought by states across this nation, I believe is a call for the federal government administrators who are withholding approved funding to lean into their better selves. It is a call for them to do what is right. It is a call to them to honor our collective promise, our commitment to our public school students. And finally, it is a call to them to show how much they revere our dedicated public school teachers and educators, many of whom have already shown up to start this school year or will be showing up soon. Show their reverence for all that they do to educate our most precious resources, our tomorrows, our children. I'll now turn it over to State Board of Education Chairman Eric Davis. Thank you.
Thank you, Superintendent Green. Well, good afternoon. I'm Eric Davis, Chair of the North Carolina State Board of Education. And on behalf of my colleagues on the State Board and the 1.5 million students we serve every day, I stand today with Attorney General Jackson, State Superintendent Green, and Chair Ellington Graves in complete support of the Attorney General's action concerning the United States Department of Education's decision to freeze $165 million in federal education funding for North Carolina's public school students. This issue is not just one more partisan disagreement. This is an unnecessary and irresponsible action against our children. One of the benefits of public education is that we welcome each and every student just as they are, and we strive every day to provide every student the education they need to become contributing members of our society. Moreover, federal law requires that we provide the services for which funding is being withheld. The funding freeze will now force districts and schools to divert other funds and resources to meet these obligations, thus harming every student across our state. In fact, every school and classroom in our state, urban or rural, large or small, across all economic and demographic groups, benefits from these resources and programs. In short, we all benefit from these programs. Of all of our collective responsibilities as Americans, educating our children should be the one that is unencumbered by partisan division. So let's unite in providing all of our children with the education they deserve for a better tomorrow for all of us. We invite our families, educators, and communities to join us in calling on the executive branch of the federal government to act now based on what is in the best interest of every student in North Carolina. Our students' futures cannot wait. I'll now turn to Chair Ellington Graves.
Good afternoon. As chair of the Alamance-Burlington Board of Education, I stand before you today alongside our State Attorney General, our State Superintendent of Public Schools, and our State Board of Education Chair, united in our commitment to the students and families across North Carolina. Specifically, I want to express my concerns about a critical issue that directly impacts the foundational support systems within our schools: the federal funding that is currently being withheld. We are deeply concerned by the decision to withhold federal education funding that directly impacts the day-to-day operations and critical support services in our schools. These funds are not discretionary. They are allocated specifically to support programs and personnel that are essential for providing a high-quality education to all students, especially our at-risk youth. The impact of these withheld funds is immediate and tangible. Let me share a few examples from our district. Title II Part A funding is key for supporting our educators. It pays for all mentor stipends, which are a crucial piece in retaining and recruiting new teachers, not only in our district, but in the profession. Funds 2 beginning teacher coordinator positions who guide about 250 new educators in our district, and covers training and teacher stipends for our summer symposium, ensuring ongoing professional development. Without it, our ability to support and develop our teaching force is severely disrupted. Title III funding directly supports our multilingual learners. It funds 2 MIL specialists, elementary and secondary, who provide direct support to students and teachers, pays for a data specialist position to track student progress, covers the Elevation software platform, which is essential to ML student data management, and provides teacher stipend for training to enhance the instruction for these students. It also pays for additional ML student-specific instructional supplies. Withholding these funds directly undermines our ability to serve our growing population of ML students, which we currently project to be around 4,000 in our upcoming school year. That is equivalent to 17% of our enrollment. Title IV funding Part A impacts student well-being and academic support. It pays for our lead counselor position, a critical position for student mental health and guidance, funds for literacy tutors at all elementary schools, which are essential for early intervention and student development. It pays for important family engagement sessions and has supported our PowerSchool analytics software used by our lead counselors to identify and target areas of student need. These are not luxuries. They are fundamental to creating a supportive and enriching learning environment. The withholding of these funds is not just a financial challenge. It's a challenge to our commitment to provide educational excellence for all students. It impacts our ability to provide the resources and support that all of our students deserve. I am thankful and encouraged, along with many others in public education, to see a united team at our state level working tirelessly to resolve this issue. Thank you.
Any questions?
Attorney General, has this lawsuit been filed yet?
Yes. And you're all going to get a copy of the lawsuit and the release that we are about to send out momentarily.
This is not the prior lawsuit about mental health.
Not sure what you're referencing, but no, this was filed all of about 15 minutes ago. Okay. Yes.
Lawsuits can take a long time. We're hearing that the effects are being felt already. So what's being done in the meantime in the immediacy to
Well, I'm going to let some other folks speak to stopgap measures. From a legal standpoint, what our lawsuit is requesting specifically is a preliminary injunction. We're asking the court to treat this as an emergency. We are hopeful that we get an outcome before the school year begins. We need this to be resolved within a matter of weeks, not months. That's our goal. As far as stopgap measures, please.
So I'll lift up two stopgap measures. One is that we are having to look for other resources, both at the state and local levels, to try to fill in these gaps. There are, for example, what's called carryover funds, federal funds that can allow for continuation of programs for a limited period of time. And so to the extent that we have some of those available, we'll use those as a potential stopgap measure. The second thing that we have to do is we have to think about actually more dramatic issues and measures as well. Things like considering doing reductions in force, doing things like not filling certain positions, combining classrooms or combining duties, because we don't know if and when these resources will ultimately become available.
in relation to that, we know that the Trump administration would like to zero out a lot of these funds come the next fiscal year. What is maybe your mindset for preparing for something like that?
Please.
So as we think about what may happen in future years, we certainly believe that we have to take the time to figure out how we adjust. Number one, see what those resources might be, right? And make adjustments along the way. So there may be some positions that absolutely have to be reduced or eliminated. There may be other ways of trying to fill in those gaps over time as well. There'll be people that leave an organization, and so you might be able to do this without having to do actual reductions in force. But let me be clear about something. When you talk about future years, then you have the opportunity to plan and then execute on the plan. Here, where Congress has already authorized funding, then we were planning to execute on the funding authorized and now find ourselves having to adjust on the fly. And that's not good for certainly educators, and it's horrible for our students as well.
Along the lines of the state superintendent's comment about future years, the one thing we absolutely need to do to prepare for future years is for our representatives in the Congress to hear from us, to hear from parents, teachers, citizens across our state on how important these programs are to their children and our children. And because it will take an act of Congress. And so our representatives need to understand how important these are. Yes.
Is it true that Congress appropriated the funding for these various title programs at the same level as last year, but not with line item appropriations for these sub-programs that didn't come? And so are you asking the court to interpret the gray area about what's required by law?
No, I don't believe we're asking the court to interpret any particular gray area here. With respect to the line item nature of anything that Congress may have approved, I'd have to take a specific look into that, but we do not consider this to be a gray area case. We consider this to be an open and shut case. Yes.
And two questions, one for you, one for Superintendent Green. What specifically did that email read? And then for Superintendent Green, what will be your message to parents who are obviously expecting some sort of disruption at the very least, probably this next school year? How best should they anticipate this?
As far as the specific email in the press release that we'll send all of you, it will have a link to the complaint. The complaint language is going to include the email. It was all of 3 sentences, so not a lot of real estate there.
Right. With regards to what can parents expect, so it's going to vary across the state as to what parents can expect the impacts to be. And I know that our educators and our school administrators will be doing everything that they can to try to minimize those impacts as best as possible. It's hard to know, right? At this moment, what will happen in an individual school. They may see, for example, a particular classroom that existed last year that may not exist this year. They may not see, for example, some of the professional development activities that are done behind the scenes to prepare new teachers to do what they need to do when they open up their classrooms this year. But that may result in those teachers not being fully prepared to support students when they arrive. And so what I would tell parents is hang in there with us as we make those adjustments. We'll try to do our best, both at the local level and at the state level, to minimize those impacts, but recognize that this is too significant for us to suggest that there won't be any impacts that aren't felt at the local and even at the state level if we don't get these withhold funds released.
Obviously, the state hasn't passed its budget yet, Mr. Green.
Yes.
Are you aware? Have you had any discussions with any legislative leaders about?
I'm sorry. Start your question.
Yeah. The state hasn't passed its budget yet. So, have you had any discussions with legislative leaders about maybe what funding might be available from the General Assembly?
Yeah. So at this point, no. Have not had any conversations with members of the General Assembly about this particular impact. Certainly, this adds to a very challenging situation for us. When you break down, I'll give you rough numbers. You're talking about 60% of our dollars comes from the state, 30 or so percent local, and then 10% federal. That varies across districts, but on average. And so now we're talking about 60% of a budget that we don't know exactly what we're going to get. And now we've added on to this. This is a significant challenge for us. This is in line, though, with something that Chairman Davis lifted up about what we need to do for future years. I would suggest to you that we need to do that for this year as well, particularly at the state level, because they haven't passed a budget. Now is a good time for them to pass a budget that will, in fact, allow our students to receive the educational opportunities they so richly deserve. And seeing what's happening at the federal level, I would encourage them to think about whether they need to increase funding to allow us to be able to do that. Okay.
This is a question, just a ballpark estimate perhaps. How much about, you say you have some stopgap money, continuation money, et cetera, about how much or how long do we have?
So it's going to vary depending on which title that we're talking about. But in general, we're talking about 3 months at the outside. In some, it's going to be less than that. Yeah, and then as stopgap measures, you're also thinking about, well, what other places might you be able to move some resources around as well? And so all of those things have to be taken into consideration. But we don't have a long window within which to deal with this issue. And in some instances, as I said earlier, school has started, and so we've got to deal with those issues right now.
State lawmakers proposed basically banning the federal government. Did that ever become? Did that ever get passed?
It passed one chamber, but not the other. I think this is a great example of why not to do something like that. This is potentially $165 million to the state. This is why you want an independent attorney general who has the authority to do exactly this thing. I think Sheena had a question for you.
Superintendent Green, can you talk a little bit about what are you hearing from school districts about how this is affecting them during their hiring?
I'm hearing a lot, and our staff is hearing a lot about the impacts to local districts in a number of different ways, including in hiring. And I want to be really clear that, in fact, hiring starts well before the start of the school year. It certainly continues over the summer, but it's already started. And so what I'm also hearing is, Mo, do we get to keep the staff that we've hired? Do we have to make adjustments to those? Now, do we continue hiring? Do we put freezes on? What do we do? Is there more yet to come? And so I'm hearing it all, right? And so when I mentioned earlier about future years and how you can develop a plan and then execute on a plan, superintendents are good at that. They're also good in dealing with crisis situations, but this is an unnecessary challenge that they're having to deal with. And it's an unfortunate one because the money is in fact there. And we've made plans and allow them to execute on those plans. And so we're hearing a lot of stress and concern, a lot of worry, a lot of disappointment in what's happening because it directly impacts our children and our educators.
Yeah.
I guess it'd be for Superintendent whoever we want to address this. Obviously, the Office of Management and Budget has argued the review is necessary to their term. Their views found that it was used to promote radical left-wing agendas. How would you respond to that? You say that maybe the money is not being used the way it should be by schools.
First of all, I've seen some reports of that. That's not the communication that came as an official communication to the State Department of Public Instruction. And so as an outset, and I want to be clear that I don't know exactly what that means or where that's coming from. What I do know is that they said the money isn't, they're holding up the money. The second thing I would say is this. Congress approved the money when it passed its budget. It's my understanding that the current administration also affirmed that approval. So to now suggest that for some reason this money is somehow another needing review because of someone's agenda, I think is deeply troubling. And then finally, I'll say this. You've heard from a local school district. You've heard from the state board. You've heard from me. You will see and receive lots of information about impacts across the state of North Carolina. And I would suggest to you that those impacts that you have heard today and will receive in your packets will suggest that this isn't about an agenda other than holding funds that directly impact the educational opportunities for our students and directly impact the ability for our educators to deliver on their educational opportunities for their students.
Anyone else? Yes.
I have one more question for the Attorney General, actually. We know this is not the first time federal grant money for education has been canceled in North Carolina. I believe in February there were teacher training grants at the university, mental health grants, and the bipartisan communities grant program. Why not pursue legal action against those? Why?
We have pursued action several times this year with respect to frozen funds or canceled funds. We've been successful in all of those. Each one of these gives a case-by-case review. When we looked at this, it met the 3 criteria that I have for joining these lawsuits. The law was broken, the state was hurt, and I can prove both of those things. When all 3 of those boxes are checked, you can expect to see action from this office. Anyone else? Yes?
Anyone had any contact with the Boys and Girls Clubs, YMCA's, the churches that do a lot of this 21st century community learning center programs?
So it's my understanding that there may be communications by members of my staff. I would have to check in on that to confirm the accuracy of that information. I do know that they are generally aware of the fact that the funds have been cut, but follow-up communications I'd have to check on.
Thank you all very much. Appreciate your time.